Welcome back, everyone! So, this one I said I was going to do a video going further in depth about the FDA attacking e-liquids and e-cigarettes. And it's not just the VULL, however you pronounce that, VUL or whatever. It's not just about that. They are attacking the e-liquids that are flavored, such as this one, by saying, well, first of all, let's look at the key arguments here.
So, we're going to look now at the three arguments that the FDA is proclamating about vape mods, e-liquids, and e-cigarettes. 1. They are advertising to children via flavors, styles of vape pens. Two, they are worse for you than cigarettes. Whoops. 3, there is an epidemic of nicotine products being used, by kids, which what they really mean is teens and adolescents. Via vape products. So those are our three arguments. And pay attention to those arguments because we are going to go over them. I want spaces. So those are our three arguments. They're advertising to children via flavor styles of vape pens, and they are worse for you than cigarettes. And then the third, there is an epidemic of nicotine products being used by kids, which what they really mean is teens and adolescents, via vape products.
All right. So we have our three main arguments, which is they are advertising to children via flavor styles and vape. We already went over this. So I did some digging, and first of all, I think that we should take a look into the articles that professed that the FDA was going to be attacking e-liquids and flavored e-liquids and e-cigarettes, which would be by CNN and the New York Times. So let's have a look at that.
So we already went over in another video that I did on the FDA of CNN's little article about the FDA doing this. There is one thing that many people have said, oh, but it's just about the Juul e-cigarette. Well, let me read this part to you. We're especially focused on the flavored e-cigarettes, and we're seriously considering a policy change that would lead to immediate removal of these flavored products from the market. This is oh, I forgot to read this part. I'll be clear, the FDA won't tolerate a whole generation of young people becoming addicted to nicotine as a trade-off for enabling adults to have unfettered access to these same products. Well, fuck you. I'm sorry. And I find that a very interesting stance, and we will get to that in a moment. But now let's take a look at the New York Times. They did another thing about it, too. E-cigarettes, risk and benefits highlights from the report to the FDA. And we will be looking at what the actual reports to what the actual FDA has to say, because I like to get my information straight from the horse's mouth, not A news vendor? Yeah. So what does the news vendor have to say that the FDA says? The National Academics of Science and Engineering and Medicine released a report on Tuesday assessing studies about the health effects of e-cigarettes. The panel of experts conducted a comprehensive review of research in the field, categorizing evidence on various issues as conclusive, substantial, limited, or non-existent. Below are some of their conclusions. Nicotine and addiction. There is substantial evidence that e-cigarettes use can be addictive. Exposure to nicotine varies a lot depending on the device and the e-liquid it uses, as well as the individual vapor's practices. You hear that, everybody? The individual vapor's practices. That's something that's going to be very hard to fucking measure, isn't it? But the report said there is also substantial evidence that nicotine intake from e-cigarettes used by experienced adults can be comparable to that of conventional cigarettes. Well, if it's the same as conventional cigarettes, what's the fuss? Moderate evidence. And this thing, the moderate evidence, I think this is probably the most rational. And I honestly think that the New York Times is giving this a pretty fair cover compared to CNN. CNN is just full of shit at this point. But the moderate evidence, the risk and severity of dependence on e-cigarettes is lower than for conventional cigarettes. Wow. What the fuck do you have to say about that? Interesting, huh? Toxic substances. Traditional cigarettes pose serious risks to human health, much of it from toxic tobacco smoke. Actually, your average cigarette is only 2% tobacco, and the rest is a bunch of other shit. They even put sugar in fucking cigarettes. They put sugar in it. I don't think e-liquids are hiding the fact that they have sugars in their shit. And they're pretty adamant that it's not for kids. They really are. They truly are. They don't even want people in their store unless they're over the 21 years of age or older. They're pretty adamant. They're actually more adamant, I think, about that than fucking tobacco stores, believe it or not. They're in conclusive evidence that most e-cigarette products contain and emit numerous potentially toxic substances, and that they increase airborne particulate matter and nicotine indoors. But despite that, the evidence suggests that e-cigarette aerosol contains fewer toxic substances and lower levels of them than smoke from conventional cigarettes. Thank you. Let's go back to this other statement. The risk and severity of dependence on e-cigarettes is lower than the conventional cigarettes. Okay. I will have the link to these things in the description below. But we're going to get to the FDA in a minute.
All right. So after we took a look at the New York Times and CNN and their proclamations on what the FDA has to say, why don't we delve in and take an actual look at what the FDA is really saying? Before we begin on that, let me stress something really quick. First of all, I by no means advocate that people under the age, or that anybody really partakes in an addiction, or something that becomes an addiction. I do advocate for individual liberties and freedoms, and that's what this is. Essentially, so is marijuana and many other prohibitions that we have. And the way that I see this is an attack on anything with nicotine in it. And the reason I say that it's fascism is because that I feel that the people that are doing this are not doing it. Like first of all, you have to examine the logical fallacy of there's an epidemic that children are using e-cigarettes. First of all, when they say children, they're not talking about children. They're talking about adolescents and teenagers. We're talking about middle school to high school. Second of all, think about the children is a logical fallacy. It is appeal to emotive force. Third, I would like to give some anecdotal here, and that I smoked for 20 years, about a pack and a half a day, somewhere around there. I used to smoke Camel Reds and then switched to making my own cigarettes, which I used American Spirit. I did not intend on quitting smoking cigarettes. I just started vaping. I vaped for 2 days. I lit up a cigarette. My tonsils got swollen and the taste came back to me and it was disgusting. And I started vaping ever since. Ever since I have started vaping, my breathing has cleared up. There's no more hacking and wheezing and coughing. I mean, occasionally you hear me cough when I take a rip off of the vape mob, but that's because I'm firing it too hot. But I don't do that regularly. I don't just sit around going like, anymore. Another thing that happened is my sense of taste and smell came back to me. Another thing that happened is I stopped waking up in the morning with a puddle of mucus in the back of my throat that was so thick it could bounce when I spit it out. It was also very brown and very gross and tasted and smelled like somebody took a shit in my mouth. It was the best way I could describe it, but that's literally how it was when I smoked cigarettes. That all went away when I started vaping. And there are many other cases like this that support this, that vaping has been a very valuable tool in stopping smoking cigarettes. However, I don't think we'll see a decline in the actual plant matter use of actual tobacco products. I think there are some people that are always going to be drawn to the actual plant matter. And in fact, I know some people who have gone to vaping, didn't like it, and went back to smoking cigarettes. There have also been a numerous amount of elderly people that have had various health conditions such as congestive heart failure, breathing problems, heart attack, stroke issues, etc., that were very linked to their smoking addiction, that switched to vaping, that ultimately saved their lives from living inside of a hospital. This is something that the medical community has actually been encouraging long-time smokers to switch to vaping to stop from any more serious damage from occurring. That is an actual thing. And so I wanted to point that out before we delved any further into this. But I'd also like to be abundantly clear that I think if you're underage, I think it's natural for teens to rebel. And unfortunately, no amount of legislation you can pass is going to stop anybody from doing whatever it is that they are going to do. So when it comes to using substances, I find it futile to make laws and legislations trying to keep people from doing it, because they don't really seem to do that. They don't seem to work, and all it really seems to do is create criminals. We've always had a legal age to buy tobacco products in the United States and many other countries as well. We increase the stakes, though, on people who are underage that are in possession of tobacco products, almost to the amount of like being in possession of a small amount of marijuana in areas where it's still illegal, to which there is a fine and possibly even probation or probation and diversion. And you're not going to stop kids from doing it. You're not going to stop teenagers and adolescents from doing it. But I think it's good that we keep programs in place to encourage people not to start the habit. However, you're never ever going to stop them from starting it, but encourage them not to. Give them the knowledge not to do it, but understand that I don't think it's something that should be a probation or diversion aspect. I don't think it's something that the government should be. I think you're essentially saying that the government should micromanage parenting. I think that when a kid is caught with tobacco products or nicotine products, the police should just turn them into their parents, let the parents do the disciplining, because there's really nothing you can do about it. And when you send a kid, a teenager or adolescent, through probation or diversion or through a detention center, you're putting them through the system, and you're going to get them exposed to even harder drug users, and that's not good either. And there is evidence across the board to support that if you do that, they are going to end up committing harder crimes. So let's delve into the Food and Drug Administration and what they have to say. Here we go.
All right, so the first article that we come across is, are e-cigarettes marketed to encourage consumers to think that e-cigarettes are safer alternatives to cigarettes? Let me also point out to you that right here, the date is dated for 7/1 of 2013. And this is one of the more recent studies. The recent studies, as I understand it, is that the FDA stance on e-cigarettes and e-liquids and vape mods is that it's such a new thing, they are unable to say that there are any negative or positive ramifications to vaping. They don't know. They do not know. There have been some cases of pneumonia reported, but not a lot other has been reported as far as negative or positive. It's just too much of a new product. So anyway, I need to stop the so anyways and put anyways, but here we go. E-cigarettes are growing in popularity, particularly among young smokers, who may perceive e-cigarettes to be safer than cigarettes. The goal of this supplemental study is to evaluate whether e-cigarettes are marketed to encourage consumers' perceptions that e-cigarettes are safer alternatives to cigarettes. Specific aims are 1. To conduct 12 focus groups with 72 young adults aged 18 through 35, current daily cigarette smokers, in order to assess smokers' perceptions of real e-cigarette ads and develop measures, including explicit and implicit attitude measures, that will be used to pursue the second aim. And 2, to conduct a laboratory-based experimental study with 400 young adult cigarette smokers. In the experimental study, half the participants will be randomly assigned to the experimental condition and exposed to real e-cigarette ads. The other half will be exposed to control images. Post-exposure, all participants will be assessed on explicit and implicit measures of attitudes towards e-cigarettes as safer alternative to cigarettes, and on measures of susceptibility to future e-cigarette use. Study findings may inform regulatory activities related to e-cigarettes. Project completed in 2014. They do not show the results here, though. Very interesting. So, let me just say this, that I did a video on the FDA regulating vape mods not too long ago, well, like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. So that was even after this had been done. So roughly around 2017, 2016, I did a video about the FDA. And they concluded that they cannot determine if there's any negative or positive side effects using e-cigarettes or e-liquid. They don't know. They say that they don't know. They have found a few coils that are made out of specific types of metal that can have a poisonous effect to them because of the type of metal that they're made out of. Those coils have been taken off the market. They're gone. So I don't know what else to say on this. On this one, composition and biologic effects of flavored e-liquids. This one is a little bit newer. This one was done in 2015 from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. E-cigarettes are sold in many flavors, yet little is known about the impact of inhaling their chemical constituents or biological and psychophysical effects and psychosocial influences contributing to their addictive properties. Both the tongue and the lung express taste receptors that elicit biological responses when savory, sweet, and bitter compounds are detected. The goal of this supplement to an ongoing study is to determine, it's an ongoing study, and this was last updated of 1/8 of 2018, so it's an ongoing study still, is to determine the reinforcing properties of different e-liquid flavorings, determine the biological effects of flavored sweet e-cigarettes on taste receptors, and further determine the chemical constituent of e-liquids. Study aims are 1. To determine the composition of flavored e-liquids by using mass spectrometry. 2. To determine the biological effects of e-liquids by composition of flavored e-liquids by using mass... Oh, I already read that. My bad. To determine the biological effects of e-liquids by measuring the in vitro response of bitter and sweet taste receptors following exposure to common brands of e-liquids. And 3. To perform a psychophysical and psychosocial evaluation of the reinforcing properties of e-cigarette flavors, including menthol, to determine which flavors are associated with varying reinforcing and analgesic properties and how psychosocial stress affects the reinforcing properties of e-cigarettes. As part of a study, AIM 3, researchers will test 75 adults ages 18 to 45. Study findings may inform regulatory activities related to e-cigarette flavorings. refilling addiction investigating marketing for e-liquid on Instagram. This one, I think, is probably the most relevant and the most modern, as it was conducted in 2017 and last updated of 1/16/2018 by the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. E-cigarette use has been steadily increasing in the U.S. over the past decade. Really? Particularly among adolescents and young adults, which the news media is calling kids, by the way. The liquids used in refillable e-cigarette devices, e-liquids, often contain nicotine and are sold in a range of appealing flavors and colors. At present, there is little understanding of how e-liquids are marketed on social media, or which social media marketing elements are most appealing and persuasive to young adults. Instagram, a social media platform in which each post contains an image or short video, is used by over half of all U.S. adolescents and young adults who use the internet. Exploratory research suggests that Instagram is home to a large volume of e-liquid posts. The goal of this study is to investigate e-liquid marketing on Instagram. Study aims are 1. To document the ways in which e-liquid manufacturers and retailers market their products on Instagram, and 2. To discern how young adults interpret and respond to e-liquid marketing on Instagram. Investigators will perform a content analysis of 2,000 Instagram posts with hashtags e-liquid and or hashtag e-juice to identify marketing themes and claims, promotional strategies, and products promoted. They will analyze health harm reduction and cessation claims, as well as products and marketing strategies known to appeal to youth. Investigators will draw posts from your time periods in 2017 and 2018 in order to capture changes in content over time. Additionally, they will track the total number of posts with each hashtag to determine trends in the volume of e-liquid activity. In addition to the content analysis, investigators will hold 12 focus groups with a total of approximately 72 18 to 24-year-olds in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who use Instagram. Focus groups will identify participant interpretations and responses to actual Instagram marketing posts. Well, this is really interesting, considering the group of people that you are investigating are between the ages of 18 and 24, which is the legal age to buy tobacco in the majority of Western civilization. Most places go younger than that. The other issue that I have with this is it seems to be a very targeted launch study to study the actual Instagram feeds and how much attention they get. It's not really indicative of what the actual marketeers are trying to do. We'll continue. And just because, well, it was a topic that was brought up, is the effects of atomizer. All I could find was the atomizer temperature on electronic cigarette aerosols, which was the date was done in 2016 by the FDA themselves. So the page was last updated of January 16, 2018. I tried looking for the recalls on the coils that had the negative ramifications, and this is the best that I could come up with. This is the best that they had on file. So there is little consensus in the scientific community on the overall toxicity of e-cigarette aerosols based on their chemical constituents. Physical characteristics of the aerosols and design parameters. There is also little published data on the accuracy of emerging temperature control technologies on how they work. The goal of this project, a joint project between FDA and CTP, and FDA and Center for Devices and Radiological Health, CDRH, is to develop a methodology to correlate. We do not do this in science, people. E-cigarette design parameters to chemical and physical aerosol characteristics. You need to really specify then that you are correlating and not a causality. I really hope that you do this. This has vendetta written all over it. But anyway, there I go again. But anyways, where was I? Physical aerosol character. The primary studies develop a methodology to correlate coil temperature and other design parameters with the resulting chemical and physical characteristics of e-cigarette aerosol. Study findings will contribute to knowledge about e-cigarette aerosol toxicity. And like I said, there were several metals that they were using and specific types of coils. They have been taken off the market. They are not being used anymore. They're not being used. So the problem that I have with this correlate is that it needs to be causality. There needs to be a causality relationship between e-cigarette design parameters to the chemical and physical aerosol characteristics. You need to know that, not just speculate. That's the problem I have with this correlate.